Welcome to Engage South KC, where we are inspired by Jesus impacting our city and the world.
Living this way is an art form that is best when practiced together. We do this together by resisting apathy,
Welcoming everyone and making sure no one is left out.
participating in remedying the concerns of those around us and around the world.
Telling our stories, and just by actually being, eating, and doing life together.
We believe that every day is another chance to live by faith
Labor in love.
and endure with hope. Join us, create with us, as we follow the brushstrokes of the Creator.
Welcome to Engage South KC.
I went up to the mountain because you asked me to. Up over the clouds to where the sky was blue, and I could see all around me, everywhere. I could see all around me, everywhere. Sometimes I feel like I've never been nothing but tired, and I'll be working till the day I expire. And sometimes I lay down, no more can I do. But then I go on again because you asked me to. Some days I look down, afraid that I will fall. And though the sun shines, I see nothing at all. And then I hear your sweet voice, come, come, and then go, telling me softly, you love me so. The peaceful valley just over the mountain, the peaceful valley that few come to know. I may never get there ever in this lifetime, but sooner or later it's there I will go. Sooner or later it's there I will go.
That song is called Up to the Mountain. It was inspired greatly by the last speech of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It was given on April 3rd, 1968, the day before he was assassinated. It was given in a crowded church in Memphis, Tennessee. Sometimes it's called the mountaintop speech. And there's this very familiar part of the speech that it was a part that I knew before I did some studying on it. I found out that this is a really long speech, and they lost a great deal of this speech, but through, looking for snippets of audio, they've been able to put the speech together and come up with what they think is the entirety of this last speech of Martin Luther King Jr. And there's even some kind of tragically funny parts. He talks about surviving another assassination attempt where this deranged lady attacked him with a letter opener at a book signing. And the doctors shared with the media that if he would have sneezed during his recovery from that attack, he would have passed away. And so he received all these letters, kind of encouraging him through his recovery. And he said the one that meant the most to him was from this little girl who simply wrote one line, said, "Dr. King, I'm glad you didn't sneeze." And he talks about how he's glad he didn't sneeze because of all the things he would have missed after that moment if he would have passed away. And those close to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. say that he was a very different man when he gave this last speech than the man he was when he said, "I have a dream." King had become a lot more prophetic in the closing days of his life. He was deeply involved in the plight of the poor. In fact, a good deal of the speech was spent talking about economic disparity in America, even more specifically talking about poor treatment of sanitation workers in America. You see, King was getting very specific about what he wanted changed in America, what it would take to change those things, and who would have to change their ways in order for that to happen. This is when King became very dangerous. See, a lot of people, both white and black, had kind of become comfortable with the pastor, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., but they weren't so sure about the prophet, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And you don't have to go very far in the Bible to find out what happens to prophets. And the part of the speech that I was familiar with, that you might be familiar with, it goes like this, and it's near the closing of the speech. He says, "Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop and I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life."
A long life, longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
See, it seemed as though King knew something that night that no one else did, and the next day, sadly, that was proven to be true. King gave no biblical reference for that closing paragraph of his final speech, and we'll never really know if it was inspired by a biblical text. But I found the words to be very similar, the word images that he uses to be similar to two other prophets that we find in the Bible, Isaiah and Micah. And I want you to take some time now to look up and read Micah 4, 1 through 3, and Isaiah 2, 1 through 5. So let's take a moment to read those passages together. Now, when you read those, you might think that translators of the Bible just got lazy, but actually it's not the case. 90% of the original Hebrew of these two texts is identical. Isaiah and Micah were contemporaries, so they lived at the same time, and they lived around the same region. So basically, biblical scholars have come up with four options for what could be going on here. One, someone copied someone's homework, like either Isaiah or Micah copied the other. Or two, they copied another prophet that we don't know about who said this, and Isaiah and Micah simply echoed it. The third thing is this, they could have been friends, and they meant to say the same thing at the same time. And the fourth option, which really we shouldn't discount, though it seems like the most miraculous, and actually is the most miraculous, is that God simply gave both prophets the same message at the same time, because it was just that important for his people to hear. So he gave them the same exact identical message to share. So what is the correlation between the words of these prophets, the three prophets, Martin Luther King Jr., Isaiah, and Micah? Well, the first obviously is the mountaintop. And here the mountaintop represents a place where the rule of God is the rule of the land. This is when the kingdom of God reigns. It's the thing that we sing about all the time in churches. It's the thing that we should be praying about as believers. We don't really know if it will be an actual mountaintop. The thing about it is it doesn't really matter, because obviously this has real world applications and implications. And we see that in the words of these three prophets. And that is the second thing that these prophets have in common. What they see when they look in the valley below, the promised land, what they see from the mountaintop. See, what they see looks different when the rule of God is on earth. For Martin Luther King Jr., it meant many things. Obviously, it meant racial equality. That people who hold the image of God, all people, regardless of their color, would be treated the same, because in fact we all are children of God. And that would be the case looking over from the mountaintop into the valley. Obviously, it means other things like economic equality. Simply put, there is enough for everyone, so everyone should have enough. And this is the case. Although we live in a world where 2/3 of the resources in the world are consumed by 1/3 of its population. So obviously, that's not what we see in the world, but that is the view from the mountaintop when we're looking into the promised land, into the valley below. To get very specific, it is better treatment for sanitation workers. The last will become first. Those who literally spend their time sifting through our you-know-what will be raised up to the highest place. This has very real-world applications and implications when you see things from the mountaintop. For Isaiah and Micah, it meant many things too, but simply put here, it means no more war. I was listening to an interview that this man was giving on the radio the other day. He'd been deployed into heavy combat situations 5 times in his life and had written a novel about the future of warfare in the world. And here we are in the wake of Veterans Day, and I so much appreciate and love those who have gone to war and fought for our freedoms. It's so important. I have friends who have done that, and I can hold that respect for them, and also dream of a day where that doesn't have to be the case anymore, where the future of war will be that there is no war, that we won't need war anymore. And that leads us to the third thing that these three prophets hold in common, and that is that they're inviting us. It's an invitation. Come, let us go up to the mountain. Martin Luther King Jr. says, I may not be able to go with you, but we are going to the mountaintop. When Isaiah breaks off from the identical words of he and Micah, he says, come, descendants of Jacob, let us walk in the light of the Lord. And if these words from these three prophets are comforting for you, then you're not capturing the intended effect of the words. They weren't meant to comfort. They were meant to stir you. They were meant to shake you up. See, all three of these prophets dealt with a similar issue in their lifetime. It had become a consistent pattern of God's people, the descendants of Jacob, to become very comfortable in their places of oppression and slavery. They acclimated to the culture. The Israelites in the wilderness begged to go back to Egypt. In Babylon, some had become very comfortable in the Babylonian culture. And later in Rome, in Jesus' day, people would become very comfortable in the rule of Rome. Not all, but some people of all colors had become very comfortable in a segregated and unjust America during Martin Luther King Jr.'s day. These three prophets are asking them, they're inviting them, and they're asking us and inviting us, will you come to the mountaintop? Even though everything you see from the mountaintop will be different. And so it will affect the things you do. And you may say, Jason, man, you're talking about some really far off stuff, racial equality and economic disparity and all these things. No, I'm not. You see, the view from the mountaintop, the true reign of God, affects everything from the ways of this world, the ways of our country, all the way down to the ways of your life. Every single moment of your personal life, from the moment you wake up to the time you go to sleep. It means viewing everything through the lens of the mountaintop and asking yourself, what would that be like if God reigned? How would that be different if I was viewing that through the rule of the kingdom of God? And if it would be different, then what am I going to do about it? Bob Goff, who, if you don't know who Bob Goff is, he's basically a living and breathing example of living this way. He says it this way. He says, everybody wants to make a difference in the world, but only a few people want to be different than the world. And that's what these three prophets are inviting us to. Going up to the mountaintop, looking over and seeing things different. And then asking us, what are you going to do about it?
Forgive us our debts as we forgive all who lead us not into